up next, we have Stanton joining us to speak about motivational AI, which is a term I had never heard of until we spoke. So hopefully some invigorating insights being shared here that everyone will enjoy and learn from. So let's welcome Aaron onto the stage.
So yeah, it's kind of funny when you first asked if I would be willing to kind of talk for 10 or 15 minutes on what we're doing. I spent some time thinking about that a little bit, and I really feel that like a lot of what we're doing kind of starts with something that people might be familiar with, which is VR, and kind of leads down a rabbit hole to, I think, what is kind of technologies and applications of things that could be revolutionary to all forms of exercise outside of VR and gameplay. So what I work on is basically virtual reality for health, virtual reality and exercise. A few years ago, back in about 2016 or so, I founded, along with some other people, the VR Health Institute, also known as the VR Institute of Health and Exercise, working out of the labs in San Francisco State University. And originally we got started because, back in the day, I was working at Apple at the time, and I was playing a lot of video games. And kind of one of the jokes is that Steam is one of the platforms that people use for playing games, and it tracks how many hours you spend playing games. And I was playing this VR game called Audio Shield, which involves a lot of jumping back and forth, trying to block things with your hands. And it said somewhere along the line that I'd played more than 100 hours in this. And I remember looking at it and thinking kind of these two things. One is that is not a number that I normally brag about, right? Kind of the joke I made at the time is that if I was going on a first date with somebody, I would probably not be like, guess what I did with the last 100 hours of my life. But the second thing that occurred to me is that while I was playing this game, I felt like I was exercising. I was sweating. I felt my heart rate was elevated, and I thought to myself, like, if this is in fact exercise, my VR equipment is by far the most effective exercise equipment I've ever owned, right? I've spent far more time on that game than I ever did on my treadmill or my elliptical or my rowing device, which were the three devices that I had kind of like bought and tried. And of course, each one of them I bought and then I'd used for a while and then stopped using after some time. In fact, I tracked it because I was tracking my exercise routines. So I could tell exactly how long it took from the point that I bought my treadmill to the last point that I actually used it for exercise, as opposed to like hanging stuff on it, which is what it generally does now. And I realized that, I never got close to 100 hours on any of them, right? So if in fact exercise is happening in VR, VR is this interesting kind of form of exercise equipment that was much more effective at getting me to engage with exercise than ever before. So I started researching on how you measure the calorie cost of unique or novel exercises. Discovered, of course, things like indirect calorimeters, which use oxygen consumption to measure how much calorie consumption you're having. And then I researched around until I found that most of the time that type of equipment is owned by universities and connected with the chair of the kinesiology department at San Francisco State University. And we put together the VR Health Institute. And so what our initial premise was really very simple, which is that people had a really hard time understanding that VR could be exercise. It was kind of this amazing thing that has gotten much, much better now. But back in 2016, 2017, you could go on and say, hey, I spent 20 minutes playing this game and my heart rate was at this elevation. I feel like I'm exercising. And you would have a lot of people push back on that. And so what we were trying to do initially was just provide reliable data about the actual calorie cost of exercising in VR. So if you play this game and you play it in a typical way and you're relatively reasonably fit and you're connected to all this equipment for measuring calorie cost, it is reasonable to expect X amount of calories per minute in burn. And so that's where we started. But and now I think there's a lot more people that understand that VR can be an interesting form of exercise. It's starting to gain momentum. In fact, I've read recently that it's one of the fastest growing segments of virtual reality. But here's where the story kind of deviates a little bit from the standard. So I think most people understand that exercise can be fun in VR, right? But that is not why I am mostly interested in it. What I am mostly interested in is two things. There's two parts of virtual reality that I think make it kind of the first of the next generation of exercise equipment. So the first of those is that it's refreshable, right? So like kind of going back to that reference of of the the treadmill, right? Nobody's surprised when I say that exercise equipment has a decay rate, that when you purchase it over time, it gets used less and less. And nobody's surprised. The vast majority of exercise equipment is actually sold at garage sales at some point in time or something similar, right? But we often kind of forget that almost everything has a decay rate. So when I bought my PS4, I played a lot of launch titles on it, right? I played Destiny, I think, for 40 or 50 hours until I beat it. But then after that, I played Destiny less and less and less. In fact, so after I beat it, I probably didn't really play much at all. And eventually I graduated to other games. Finally, I'm Destiny 2, and then there's the next generation of consoles. And so the idea that somehow you can make a single game that is going to be entertaining enough and exercise enough to kind of solve all of your needs for exercise is kind of like not really very realistic. So what makes VR interesting, though, is that it's the first generation of exercise equipment that for 10, 20, 30, $40, I can refresh it the same way that I refresh my game console. Same way in a way that like a new episode of Game of Thrones or something like that coming out, right? It lets you kind of run on the treadmill with a little bit less discomfort for a little bit longer than you otherwise would have, except for in a much, much more engaging way. The second component about VR, though, that I think is the most fascinating, and this is where it touches on the motivational AI component, is that VR is the first generation of exercise equipment where it can meaningfully react to you based upon what your targets are and what your biofeedback signals are. So, for years, a treadmill has been capable of telling you what your heart rate is. You could also set kind of your HIT intensity, and it could probably tell you maybe what your targets might be. But a treadmill knowing that you're at 120 beats per minute and that you need to get to 150 beats per minute, there's not that much the treadmill can do, right? It can increase elevation, it can increase speed, but like really, it's still just running on the treadmill. But VR is different, right? VR, again, knowing that you're at 120 beats per minute and you're trying to get to 150 beats per minute, can literally change everything in your environment in a very obvious or very subtle way, right? So the enemies can become more aggressive if you're boxing. So you have to duck more, dodge more. And then, or let's say you're like my father, who after having heart surgery had to exercise, but exercise with his heart rate below a certain rate, right? So if your heart starts getting too high, the game can adjust on the fly, the enemies can back off, the types of enemies you encounter can change. And so what you can do is build in very, very subtle kind of guides to kind of coach you through your exercise experience in an optimized way. And this is fascinating to me, right? This is fascinating because the idea that exercise can be done in a way it's not only less painful, more effective, and more fun, but it's also kind of a perfected version, right? That it can make sure that, so you're playing, you're exercising and you're failing the game, you're likely to quit. And if you quit, you'll lose your exercise potential for the day. And so let's make sure the game doesn't fail on you. So this comes in the second thing, which is what I refer to as motivational AI. And I believe that exercise in VR is kind of a perfect training ground for the next generation of what AI can do for people, right? If you think about what we hope AI is able to accomplish for us, a lot of it is going to be around helping us do things better or more of that we know we want to do, that we have chosen for ourselves to do, but we are not doing well on our own. And exercise is a great example of this, right? The vast majority of the American population, specifically, I don't know global stats, but the vast majority of the American population, roughly 70%, do not get enough exercise. Everybody generally acknowledges that we should probably get more exercise, and everybody generally acknowledges that we're likely to live longer if we're healthier. And so we have this amazing product, which is essentially free to do because you can get exercise almost any way you want, saves your life, and yet the vast majority of us don't do it at all. So like there's something really weird going on in the what is the product of exercise, right? So if you think about the feedback loop in exercise in VR, we have something we know we like, that we know we need to do, that causes many people discomfort and they don't like actually doing it. And so you have a very, very fast feedback loop where if we wanted to study how to get people to stay engaged with something, we can build a data set for this. So for example, right now, there's not really a lot of data out there in like the kinesiology world about what gets people to exercise more or to stay engaged in exercising for a longer period of time. So a lot of people, for like HIT, for example, a lot of people, will speculate that some people stop at the peak of a HIT, right? They get to the point where like, I'm just tired, I can't do anymore, I'm just gonna quit, right? On the other hand, most personal trainers will probably tell you that they think people quit in the trough, right? They get done with a HIT, come down, they're like, I just did that. I don't think I can complete another HIT. I don't have time. I don't have the energy. So I'm going to quit before I start, right? But we don't really know that. And in reality, if you actually could measure everybody's quitting time whenever they were doing HIT exercise, probably we'd find it a mix. That some people quit one spot and some people the other. We also know in gameplay that, for example, that people don't tend to quit during a boss fight, or if there's some sort of major event, they don't quit until after the major event is completed. So if you have a system that is walking you through some target heart rate ranges and knows you're trying to get another 10 or 15 or 20% exercise, and it knows that you've been playing 25 minutes out of your 30-minute workout, you are tired, and that if you die at this point in the game, there is a 90% chance that you're going to quit, that your exercise is done, and you are losing. From an exercise standpoint, from a motivational AI standpoint, what that system should be doing is ramping down the difficulty very, very subtly. So you're just at that point of maximum achievement without feeling like you're losing anything, right? And so the idea that you can have a coach that sits back in the background who knows you and understands you, you get to the last 3 minutes of your workout, an average boss fight is 5 minutes long. Should we start a boss fight 3 minutes before the end of the workout because we know you're going to play all the way through the 5 minutes? So you get past that barrier, those points that you normally quit naturally. Can we figure out a way to kind of intercept those signals and kind of get you over that hump? And that's really what that was kind of, I think that concept of AI being able to facilitate things that we need to do and know we want to do, but are not well good doing ourselves is really what I think kind of the future of VR and AR exercise looks like. So I guess, are there any questions after that spiel?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Aaron. No questions coming in from the chat. I encourage attendees, if you have any questions, fire them over. We still have some time. But yeah, I love hearing about your work, Aaron, as always. And when we talked the other day, I was just completely engrossed in the conversation. I think you have a lot to share, a lot to offer. Sort of this world crosses industries. Yeah, it's really interesting because there's so many potential applications for it. Yeah, it really has the chance to shake things up.
Yeah, I think so too. It's kind of interesting because I mean, we think about AI and we think about it like from my perspective. I've said this before, but like from my perspective, AI is really about like having a system that can tell what's happening in the world around us and being able to deliver information at the point you need it to make decisions before you need to make the decisions. Like we see this with GPS, right? Turn by turn direction is literally a computer telling where we are, helping provide us the information on which direction to go right before that information is relevant to us. And to be honest with you, like the best personal assistant in the world would be somebody who'd be able to show up with that exact same information for everything you're doing. The role of VR and AR is not because they can display information on top of the world you're already seeing. It's because it has the ability to kind of tell what's happening in your world at the same time and help make decisions for you. And understanding that, I think, is fundamental to all these tools that, whether it's doing more homework or getting more exercise or writing that email that you don't want to write but need to for work. It's all in there somewhere.
Absolutely. It looks like we have a question that's come through. Joe says, so is augmented exercise the future of products like the mirror in your bedroom? Like, are we really wearing VR goggles, or is it more sensors with AI helping us along?
I mean, I think it's both. I think VR is the kind of precursor to what's really going to happen in augmented reality, right? And so whether or not that's glasses or mirrors that are projecting information and reading something from you, I mean, I think VR is where it's happening first, the training ground for that data set, because it's just further along, right? But really, it's just laying the groundwork for what, in 10 years, there's going to be a pair of sunglasses that somebody's wearing running around a lake somewhere that's not giving them points to collect or collecting some sort of information about how they can achieve what they're trying to achieve in a better way. So yeah, I mean, I think that concept of motivational AI, I think, is going to be very definitely a part of the future, and we have to be cognitively aware of that now so that we can make decisions about that. But the I think most people don't realize that I think that VR and exercise is where the foundation of that will get the most usable, actionable data from.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And Joe is all lined up to buy the sunglasses when they come out, he says. Just to wrap up, because we're coming up to time, I think it would be wonderful, when we spoke, Aaron, we were talking about, how a lot of times futuristic AI is portrayed as very dystopian, as very destructive, as like antagonistic to human existence. And for fear of getting a little too philosophical, I really enjoyed what you shared about the flip side of that, of how AI could actually be extremely beneficial for us, extremely helpful. And I think that would be a nice way to wrap up is,
Sure.
if you want to share what you think that vision is of what it looks like to be lucky in the future.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure it's necessarily perfectly good. But one of my favorite movies is Her, and because it's one of the few movies that exists about a super advanced, intelligent AI that does not want to destroy humanity. Like, it is possible to be super advanced and also neutral about humanity, or even positive. But I think that that representation is actually a simplification of what future AI will look like, because it's, we think of like, oh, a super, super smart person running 24 hours a day, doing nothing but try to make our life better is the best we can think of a lot of times with AI. But I think we forget what happens that, like, when everybody's phone is doing that at the same time, that what real AI will look like is like just being like the luckiest person in the world. Like you wake up in the morning, and you walk out the front door and it starts to rain, and somebody hands you an umbrella. And then you're like, why does it have this umbrella? And you go to work and you do your work, and you come home, and on the front porch is some groceries that have been delivered, and there's 4 eggs in there, and you're not really sure why. And then later that night, your boss calls because his car is broken down across the street, and you make him dinner, and he loves something that needs 2 eggs, and you always break 2 eggs by accident when you cook. And so you break the 2 eggs, you have just enough eggs left over to make the perfect dinner. And it all happened because at some point in time, your AI was talking to his AI, and his AI had decided that there was a non-zero chance that his car would break down because it's been way too long since maintenance. And that, in fact, when it did break down, it optimized his location to be close to somebody he knew so he could help when it was necessary. It ordered you 4 eggs in advance because it knows statistically you break 2 out of the eggs every single time you make it. And your boss's favorite meal requires at least 2 eggs. And the umbrella was handed to you because somebody else was done with the umbrella, and their AI talked to your AI and said, listen, you're in a hurry. You need to throw away this umbrella. Go hand it to that guy instead of carrying it around with you all day, and we'll get you a different umbrella later, right? So like true AI, I think, is so far below the conscious level of what we see that true AI will just be everybody being 1,000% more lucky than they are today.
Amazing. I just love that. So we've totally come up on time, but so worth it. Thank you so much, Aaron, for your time, for your talk, and for joining us at the Innovator Summit this year. We really appreciate it. Amazing. Yeah, well, enjoy the rest of your night over there in Vietnam. And we will be on to the next.